Huh? Clock Tower. While not exactly a household name in the gaming world, it's a series we owe a lot to. A series that, while many may not have played it, its influence can still be felt in video games to this day. Clock Tower effectively birthed the stalker horror or stealth horror genre back in the mid-90s, going against the grain by favouring tension and atmosphere building over combat or boss fights. It was a revolutionary title that sadly never made its way to Western territories until 2024, almost 30 years after its original Japanese release. Now, if you've been around my channel a while, this is far from my first time bringing up Clock Tower. One of the first videos on my channel was when I covered the entire series in one go back in 2022, and a good few of you probably found my channel through that video. Something I am still eternally grateful for, but please do not go back and watch it. Any video older than a year does not exist. Jokes aside though, that was my first real attempt at a video essay, and I only spend 10 minutes of the runtime discussing the original SNES Clock Tower. Simply put, that is not enough. I have so much more to talk about and so much love to share about this game, and so Rewind's release back in 2024 felt like a perfect opportunity for round 2, the ultimate excuse to geek about this game a little bit more. Consider this a celebration of what is easily my favourite horror game ever created. So let's refresh our horror history a little bit. In the late 80s and early 90s, horror as a gaming genre was only starting to blossom. Titles like Sweet Home, Dr. Hauser, and Alone in the Dark all released during this time, as the classic survival horror formula of item management, puzzle solving, and a creeping atmosphere started to take shape. It was an experimental and formative time for horror gaming, enough to catch the attention of a company called Human Entertainment, a developer who mostly specialised in sports games up until that point. And for good reason. Sports games were a safe and sustainable business model that had been keeping Human afloat since it was founded in 1983. But as the company approached its 10-year anniversary, they wanted to try something new. In 1993, they launched their so-called Cinematic Live series, a trilogy of games released on the SNES that aimed to achieve movie-like realism and tense blood-pumping gameplay. The first title was Septentrion, though you may know it better as its Western title SOS. Set aboard a sinking ship in the 1920s, gameplay revolves around rescuing as many survivors as possible under a time limit. The second title in the Cinematic Live series was The Firemen, which is pretty self-explanatory. You are a fireman saving civilians and putting out fires. Both of these titles did pretty well, and it was during this time that Hifumi Kono, a Human Entertainment employee who had been working there for about 2 years, caught wind of a competition going on within the company. Everyone could pitch ideas for a game, and whichever one was the most popular would go into full development as the third and final Cinematic Live series title. Being a massive horror fan, Kono threw his hat into the ring, suggesting a tense, atmospheric game that would involve hiding from a stalker. His idea won the competition, and so began the development of Clock Tower, with a small budget and an even smaller team. Even by 90s standards, Clock Tower was a very offbeat concept. While most games let you be an unstoppable killing machine that mowed down enemies like it's nobody's business, in Clock Tower you are playing as a defenseless orphan child. Whereas most other games used jazzy colour palettes and booming music to go alongside it, Clock Tower was an unnervingly quiet game, and most of your playthrough is silent aside from Jennifer's footsteps echoing throughout the halls. In fact, Clock Tower was so different that even most of the development team didn't have faith it would succeed at all. In an interview, Kono said that his colleagues struggled to see how a title with such slow gameplay could succeed, with one member of the team outright calling the game boring. While it's easy to laugh now, their cynicism at the time was understandable. On paper, a borderline silent game with little to no action and a slow burn story was a very hard sell in the 90s, not to mention the fact it was releasing on a family-friendly Nintendo console. By all accounts, it was an incredibly risky business move. Despite the team's apprehension, however, Kono had a clear vision for what he wanted Clock Tower to be. He was a big fan of the works of Dario Argento, who directed films like Suspiria and Phenomena, and their influence on Kono's work is hard to miss. The 1981 horror film The Burning was also a major influence, with the disfigured, scissor-wielding villain Cropsy bearing a striking resemblance with Clock Tower's own Scissorman. To reiterate, this game released in 1995. The survival horror genre did not officially exist yet. Resident Evil 1 released a year later, and is often credited with creating the blueprint of survival horror, but it's important to remember that plenty horror games existed before that too, and Clock Tower is one such example. If Resident Evil created the shooting enemies and preserving ammo horror formula, then Clock Tower created the stalker horror formula. In this game, there's no guns, there's no ammo, there's no weapons of any kind. In fact, you have no means of fighting back against the Scissorman at all. Your only option is to run and hide. There are fixed spots around the mansion where you can do this, but finding them while a stalker is hot on your tail is easier said than done, especially when you have to weigh up your options. Should I run into this room here and pray there's somewhere to hide, or keep running back to a more tried and tested spot that I found earlier? Not to mention, some hiding spots seem to have a better chance of working than others. Hiding under the bed is almost always a surefire way of shaking off the Scissorman, but I've never had any luck hiding behind a curtain, for example. Just because you find a hiding spot doesn't mean you're safe. So not only are you running away from a scissor-wielding maniac, but you have to consider your options. Is it safe or too risky? Weigh up the odds of survival, all in the middle of a chase. If he does manage to corner you, Jennifer's portrait will begin to flash, and you need to mash the buttons quickly to save her. It's effectively a very, very early version of a QTE, and this system even had a name that was often used in Clock Tower's original marketing, or SI, which is an acronym for the Japanese phrase "Renda sezu ni wa irarenai," roughly translating as "you have to mash that button." It's really cool to see that human entertainment were ahead of the gaming curve by about 20 years, with a QTE mechanic that would only become more mainstream years later. Timelessness is one of this game's many great strengths. Despite its age, Clock Tower still evokes a strong feeling of panic and anxiety even today, a kind of horror that's very different from the likes of Resident Evil or Silent Hill. You can't just shoot the enemy dead, you have to run away from them, unwillingly exist with them in the same cramped space, and simply hope that you don't cross paths. And you really do have to keep on your toes, because you never know when Scissorman is around the corner. Whether it's poking out from behind a curtain or crashing down from the ceiling, his actions as an enemy are erratic and unpredictable. You can never rule out the fact he could be hiding in a room waiting for you, and it makes for a pretty terrifying experience. This element of surprise is not just limited to the enemy movements either, but rather it's inherently built into Clock Tower's design. It's an aspect of this game that I feel isn't talked about nearly enough, to be honest. Every playthrough is different, because a number of important rooms and key items are randomized every playthrough. The West Wing key, for example, can be found in 2 different locations, either in a box on the shelf or in a bird's nest, for some reason. The silver key can open one of 2 doors in the same room, and the golden key will then open the other door. When you run through this upper floor hallway connecting the east and west wings, there's a random chance you'll hear a scream come from outside. If you go to look, you'll see one of your friends Anne being murdered by Scissorman, and this can affect which ending you get. Some of the scares are randomized as well. A faucet will leak either blood or maggots, both equally unpleasant. Or picking up the key in the child's room will lead to either the clown doll or the French doll coming alive and attacking you. The entire West Wing is randomized every playthrough as well. 2 people could play this game for the first time, and their playthroughs would be wildly different from each other. But the good thing about the randomization in Clock Tower is it never feels too, well, random. There's just enough difference to keep you on your toes, but not so much that it feels like you can never get your bearings in the mansion. It's just enough to make every playthrough feel fresh. Beyond the randomization, there's also just an insane amount of different routes depending on how you play. While the shower scene is probably how most players first encounter the Scissorman, he has 2 other equally dramatic entrances if you instead go to the foyer or the courtyard outside, all of them unfortunately killing one of your friends. At a certain point, you might find yourself locked up in a cage, and you'll either be saved by Lottie after a few minutes, or you can just free yourself with a key if you did a bit of exploring before this. I only just discovered while making this video that if you see Anne get thrown out of the window, you can then jump out of that broken window during a chase to fall into the courtyard and escape the Scissor Man. I thought I knew almost everything there is to know about this 30-year-old game, and yet I am still learning new things. Randomization and branching paths weren't that crazy back in 1995, but the way that this game is designed to account for every playstyle and approach, the way that it still contains such a tightly written narrative despite how open-ended it is, and how your approach can then result in one of 9 different endings, all of this is still really impressive by modern-day standards. Not only is it one of the first horror games ever, but the level of complexity in its design and how well they pulled it off still trumps some horror games releasing in the modern day, in my opinion. In Andy Hamilton's essay featured in the horror anthology book Mention, they said, "It's almost like Clock Tower is a work of fucking genius, isn't it?" And frankly, I couldn't sum it up any better myself. The tension of not knowing what's around the next corner is heightened, of course, by the gorgeously detailed pixel art on display here. There was a lot of care put into making the visuals as realistic as possible, despite the graphical limitations of early 90s hardware, and they did a damn fine job. I'm a particularly big fan of the still shots dotted throughout the game, like when Jennifer finds a body stuffed into the suit of armor, or looks at this photo in the bedroom. The harsh shadows make these shots so unsettling. It feels like something could be lurking in the darkness just beyond us. This same foreboding, oppressive atmosphere can be felt just walking through the mansion. The careful attention to shadows and lighting, the sprawling hallways of the mansion feeling more akin to a labyrinth than a home, Jennifer's portrait in the corner changing depending on how distressed she is, as well as the impressive realism of the character's movements. On Jennifer's model, for example, you can see the folds of her dress moving as she walks, or her hair swaying behind her as she runs. This level of realism and detail was achieved through a process called digitization. A motion model would act out all of Jennifer's movements, whether this is walking, running, picking something up, or so on. This would all be photographed, digitized, and then used as a basis for the character model. This was a pretty common method of creating realistic graphics back in the 80s and 90s. The older Mortal Kombat games are a popular example of this same digitization process. In Clock Tower's case, Jennifer's motion model wasn't a hired professional, but actually one of their fellow office workers at Human Entertainment. Hifumi Kono elaborated on this in recent years. Jennifer's motion model was a colleague of mine who worked in the planning department at the time. When we told her about the project, she wore a white blouse and navy blue skirt on the day of the shoot. That outfit then became Jennifer's outfit in the game. Later adding, she really threw herself into her performance, putting up with things like falling in the hallway or having to dangle from a small ledge above the entrance doorway of the building, and most of it was more or less exactly reproduced in the game. Combine the detailed sprite work with the minimal but very intentional sound design, and you can see why someone would have been scared playing this back in the 90s. Unless you're actively in chase, Clock Tower is a very silent game. For most of your playtime, you'll simply be listening to Jennifer's footsteps as she runs through the hallways, and that's it. There's the occasional sound effect here or a horror stinger there, but otherwise you are enveloped by a suffocating silence as you explore. A constant reminder that you are completely alone. Everyone else has either escaped or is already dead. This stillness was a deliberate design choice, because it becomes all the more threatening when that silence is severed by the metallic scraping of scissors. And being a horror game, Clock Tower takes advantage of this quietness in more ways than one. Simple things like a loud gust of wind rattling the windows, or a cat suddenly hopping out of an otherwise unsuspecting box in the corner, though sometimes you can get unlucky and Scissor Man will hop out instead. This isn't to say Clock Tower doesn't have any music. It most certainly does, and the fact it's used so sparingly makes it all the more memorable when it does show up. Easily one of the most well-known things about this game is the chase music that plays whenever the Scissor Man is hot on your heels. The booming drums, the 80s style synth, and the ambient sounds in the background that almost sound like a heartbeat. It's such a blood-pumping, exhilarating track and really captures the urgency and terror that both the player and Jennifer are feeling. I am also very partial to a good musical motif, a running melody that appears across multiple songs on a soundtrack, and Clock Tower also delivers on that front, usually whenever you reach an important area or very pivotal story moment. The music was composed by the very talented Koji Nikura and Kaori Takazoe. Nikura went on to become a very prolific composer in the game industry, with credits from God of War to Shadow of the Colossus to Loco Roco. That means the same man who composed this also composed this. Small world. When it comes to the horror though, it's clear as day that Clock Tower is going for a very specific brand of horror. To break it down, let's look at some of the major characteristics on display here. Between the music and fashion, it's clear that this game is set in the 70s or somewhere within that ballpark. We don't know the identity of the Scissor Man, but we do know that he's killing everyone, so it's both a horror and a murder mystery. There's also plenty of striking, colourful visuals, something that is not exactly common in the horror genre. Cinephiles will already know where I'm going with this, because everything I've just mentioned are key characteristics of giallo cinema. Giallo was a genre of film that rose to prominence in the 70s and 80s, primarily in Italy, as you may have guessed from the name. To sum it up in a sentence, imagine if the slasher, thriller, and murder mystery genres had a baby, and there you go, you've got a giallo movie. The most well-known examples would be the works of Dario Argento, who we mentioned earlier, with his films Deep Red, Suspiria, and Phenomena practically defining giallo cinema as we know it. That last one, Phenomena, is particularly important to us today, because Clock Tower simply would not exist without that movie, and has been directly stated by Hifumi Kono as one of the game's strongest influences. Let's look at a few similarities. Spoilers for both Phenomena and Clock Tower incoming. Phenomena follows a young American girl Jennifer moving to a Swiss boarding school. This mirrors the events of Clock Tower, where Jennifer is moving from an orphanage to her new home, this time in the Romsdalen region of Norway. The two characters even look identical, sharing the same age and jet black hair. Though the similar appearances might also be because the actress, Jennifer Connelly, was already very popular in Japan in the 80s, appearing in a lot of television ads and even releasing a single at the age of 16, entirely sung in Japanese. The central conflict of Phenomena involves a number of young girls in the boarding school being brutally murdered by a masked killer. In Clock Tower, the girls are being murdered by the mysterious Scissor Man. The villain of Phenomena ends up being the headmistress, who bears a striking resemblance and personality to Mary. Finally, there's the musical style. Many of Argento's film soundtracks were created by the Italian prog rock band Goblin, and their inspiration is very clear in Clock Tower's music. Not only Phenomena, but influences from Argento's other works can be seen too. A girl is murdered atop a striking stained glass ceiling in Suspiria, for example, and practically the exact same thing can happen at the beginning of Clock Tower as well. There's no doubt that this game is a proud love letter to giallo cinema and Argento's filmography in particular, but it does plenty to set itself apart and shape its own identity too. There's the sheer fact of it being a video game and not a film, for starters, but while Argento's work often had hints of supernaturalism, Clock Tower goes a lot further with this concept, even introducing hints of cosmic Lovecraftian horror into the mix as well. To be able to discuss all of this though, let's talk about the plot of Clock Tower. Set in Norway, Jennifer and the other girls from Granite Orphanage are adopted by Mary and Simon Barrows, a wealthy couple who live in the mansion known locally as the Clock Tower, which is fair enough because it's kinda hard to miss it. As for Jennifer herself, her mother died when she was young and her father went missing one day, so she's glad to finally have a home again. As they settle into their new home, Mary goes off to fetch her husband Simon, but she never comes back. The girls grow anxious, and Jennifer offers to go look for Mary, but mere seconds after leaving the room, she hears a scream. The girls are all missing and the lights have gone out. No matter which route you take after this, you will sadly witness one of the girls' grisly demise. Either Laura in the shower, Anne crashing through the stained glass ceiling, or Anne drowning out in the pool. They died at the hands of the Scissor Man, a child wielding a gigantic pair of scissors, and he's now got his sights set on Jennifer. After shaking him off in a chase, it's time to get investigating. During our travels, we come across a number of oddities. Animal cages full of rats and crows, a library full of ominous books, and the ritual room with a sinister-looking symbol on the floor. There's clearly something strange afoot here, and how much or how little you learn about it will impact which ending you get. Exploring the colossal mansion, you'll eventually notice a weak wall in the storeroom, and breaking it down reveals a small hidden room. Jennifer comments that the air is stagnant in here, and there's etchings on the wall showing someone has been counting the days. Approaching the lone skeleton in the corner of the room, she finds a note, what appears to be their dying letter. The man was a doctor for the Barrows family, and writes that Mary gave birth to 2 demon children. We've already met one of them, the Scissor Man. From the second they were born, their violent tendencies were clear, with one of them biting off the doctor's hand during childbirth. Mary then locked the doctor in this room, leaving him to rot, and he finishes the letter begging the reader to put an end to the 2 demon children. Jennifer, Jennifer, Jennifer. The letter is signed by Jennifer's father, Walter Simpson. Thanks to the open-ended exploration of Clock Tower, there's a chance you might encounter Mary in the lounge. If you've already read Walter's letter, then you have a brief few moments to escape. If you haven't read the letter, however, Jennifer will be none the wiser to Mary's actions and will run to her in tears, finally relieved to find another person alive. It doesn't take long for Mary to show us her evil intentions, however. She offers us a drink to calm down, only to end up poisoning us. We wake up in a cage, locked in with a man who looks like he hasn't seen sunlight in months, barely able to string a coherent sentence together. If you dawdle here for too long, his hunger gets the better of him and he'll eat Jennifer alive. Ugh, gnarly. But if you're quick, you can feed him some food you picked up earlier, and we learn that this man is Simon Barrows, Mary's husband. He says rather ominously that it is watching us from a cradle under the star, but Jennifer isn't able to parse much meaning from it. Not long after, Lottie comes to the rescue, freeing us from our prison, but she's followed by Mary wielding a shotgun who kills her without hesitation. We now know clear as day that Mary is bad news, and it's safe to assume both her and the Scissor Man are working together. Jennifer is vastly outnumbered. At this point, your main objective is finding either the demon idol or the staff. Doing so will allow you to open a path underground in the ritual room, leading to the final stretch of the story. If Lottie didn't die saving you from the cage earlier, you will sadly find her down here. With her last breath, she tells us to flip the switches of the clock tower and dies in Jennifer's arms. Continuing into the caverns, it's hard not to notice a distant wailing sound, almost like an animal crying out. You also might have noticed that Walter's letter mentioned there being demon twins, but so far we've only seen one, Scissor Man. Walking into this rather gaudy room, we find the source of the wailing sounds echoing throughout the caverns, the second demon child Dan as a deformed and grotesque oversized baby. As soon as he sees Jennifer, he crawls after her, clearly just as violent as his brother. Jennifer tries her best to outrun him in arguably the most tense section of the game. She crawls up the rocky terrain and grabs hold of a can of kerosene, throwing it at the overgrown child and setting him alight. The opening of Clock Tower 2 starts with a flashback of this exact scene, recreated in CGI graphics. Jennifer rushes to the elevator she found in a nearby tunnel, her sights set on the clock tower and putting an end to this nightmare. As she leaves, the camera pans back to the demon's burnt remains, and a small child can be seen rising from it. This scene is absent in the original SNES version of Clock Tower, only occurring in the PS1 re-release onwards. It foreshadows the events of Clock Tower 2, which released a year later in 1996. Jennifer heads for the clock tower, but Scissorman catches up to her, crashing into the elevator. She climbs the ladder to the highest point and finds the switches Elodie told her about. Switching them on, the gears start to turn as the bells of the clock tower finally work again. This seems to cause the Scissorman a great deal of stress, covering his ears and losing his balance as he falls to his death, allowing Jennifer to breathe a sigh of relief. It's possible for either Anne or Laura to survive until this point, but the reunion is short-lived as Mary rushes in and pushes them off the edge, blinded by rage after we killed her son. This final showdown can go in one of two ways. After a desperate struggle, Mary can be shoved into the switches behind her, electrocuting her to death. Or, if you saved the crows in the animal room earlier, they'll swoop in with perfect timing, attacking Mary and forcing her to fall off the side of the tower. Now finally safe, Jennifer silently walks out to the balcony of the clock tower as the ominous bells toll. As the rain clears, the sky brightens and the credits roll. Cinema. While it is possible for one of the other girls to survive in Ending S, this is sadly not canon, as decided by Clock Tower 2, where Jennifer is revealed to be the only survivor of the incident. There are a whopping 9 endings in this game total, and they are all determined by a number of factors. Which of the girls die, and when? How much do you learn about Mary, the clock tower, and your father, if you learn anything at all? When you make it to the clock tower elevator, do you get off on the 2nd or the 3rd floor? Do you save the animals in the cage room, or do you ignore all of this and opt for a quick escape using the car, which leads to the worst endings and a rather grisly death for Jennifer? Though my personal favourite ending has to be Ending C, which requires you to learn about Mary and the clock tower but never discover your father or Simon. Jennifer manages to narrowly escape being stabbed, as Mary chases after you onto the balcony and up the side of the clock tower. Mary ends up falling to her death, and the game ends with Jennifer being cornered by Scissorman at the top and dispatching of him in the usual way. She saved herself from being murdered but never got any closure about her father, placing this ending around the middle of the ending ladder. It's a unique sequence that only happens in this ending, but I always get so tensed up watching Mary gaining on us on the ladder. To sum it up, the ending system of Clock Tower rewards you for exploring and learning as much as you can during a single playthrough, and they're all sufficiently different from each other that it adds immense replayability. All in all though, Clock Tower has a fairly humble story. It's a pretty typical slasher formula of people go to place, bloodthirsty maniac shows up, starts killing everyone, and hilarity ensues. And if that's all you want the story to be, it does it very well. Despite its simplicity though, there's still a lot of mystery surrounding the events of the game. Like the supernaturalism, for example, a phone ringing only for the cord to be cut, a hand reaching out of the mirror and attacking Jennifer, the mummy hidden in the locker that suddenly springs to life. You just never know what's around the next corner, and that is effective horror on its own. But what's equally unsettling is how these things just happen. We don't get any kind of explanation or reason. Creepy supernatural stuff just happens and you never find out why. That mummy I just mentioned freaked me out a lot when I first played this game because I couldn't figure out what the hell I was looking at. My 13-year-old self was convinced it was a monkey. Yeah, brilliant tango. Genius. But stupid speculation aside, it dwelled on my mind regardless, simply because I couldn't make heads or tails of it. The lack of reason or logic was creepy to me. It's a fear of the unknown, and Clock Tower has it in spades. But for people who are still yearning for an explanation, I got you. There were 2 novelizations of Clock Tower that released back in the 90s. Well, specifically they were novelizations of the second game, but naturally enough they delve into the events of the first game quite a bit. Much like the format of Clock Tower 2 itself, each novel follows one of the 2 female protagonists, Jennifer and Helen. And having read them both, they're honestly really solid books. I enjoyed them a lot. Definitely well worth a read if you're a big fan of this series, mainly because they add a lot of excellent character development. For example, great emphasis is placed on Jennifer's survivor's guilt, with one excerpt from her novel stating, "In the clock tower incident, she'd faced terrors that would induce madness in lesser souls and seen all of her friends die before her eyes. Her heart still bore the scars." And it sure as hell makes sense, doesn't it? Let's not forget that this is a 14-year-old girl going through all of this. Seeing her friends get killed, being chased down by the Scissor Man, and even finding her own father's corpse, man, Jennifer is going through it. She runs into Mary's arms, longing for comfort and safety, only to be betrayed by her as well. If you free the crows from their cage, Jennifer laments the fact that she can't escape her own situation as easily, wondering whether she'll even make it out alive at all. When her last friend Lottie passes away, Jennifer cries out, begging to not be left alone. It's really heartbreaking stuff. Clock Tower doesn't have much dialogue, but the dialogue it does have is used effectively, saying a lot with very few words. This was the mid-90s, of course, and video games were still only blossoming into having the deep, complex narratives they often have today. But even despite Clock Tower's age, there is something very human and tragic to the way Jennifer is written, and you can't help but become protective of her. In a similar vein, one thing I really adore is the dynamic between Jennifer and the Scissor Man. You are constantly reminded that both you and your stalker are, at the end of the day, children. Bobby is only 8 years old, after all, and because of that, it feels like he doesn't fully grasp that what he's doing is absolutely psychotic behaviour. Violence is an intrinsic part of him. Even his own bedroom has been slashed and destroyed. Stalking and killing these girls is nothing more than a game of tag to him, as you can often hear him laughing when he's nearby. Bobby doesn't see it as a murder spree, but as a schoolyard game of hide and seek, and much like a child, he's eager to win. Because of his childish mentality, Scissor Man encounters can sometimes be silly or even whimsical, offering an unexpected moment of humour during a chase. Being a child, he'll often resort to childish methods, hiding in a tiny box in the corner of the room or behind a curtain to scare you. If he can't find you, he'll snap his scissors in frustration and storm out of the room. If you manage to knock him over, he'll sometimes stretch his leg out at the last second, tripping over Jennifer as she tries to run away. There is a childlike immaturity to the way Bobby acts as a villain, and his personality is woven into his behaviour. How he moves, how he reacts, the ways he tries to scare you. You're constantly reminded that the same person who's violently murdering everyone is also an 8-year-old, making him a villain that is as terrifying as he is weirdly endearing. And this is all achieved without Bobby uttering a single line of dialogue for the entire game. His characterization is shown to us exclusively through the gorgeous sprite work and animations. They do such a good job at bringing the Scissor Man to life. Endearing as he may be though, he's still a murderer, and he does not mess around. Not only is he impossibly strong, able to drag around a pair of scissors that are twice his size, but the spooky, supernatural phenomena happening around us are all thanks to this little shit. As explained in the novelizations, both Bobby and his brother Dan, who takes to the stage in the sequel game, have psychokinetic abilities, being able to move things with their mind. Inanimate objects coming to life, a mannequin's head falling off as we pass by. These are all things the Scissor Man is doing purely to mess with Jennifer's head. Even when he's not physically there, he's still tormenting her. And like a predator to its prey, he's playing with his food before going in for the kill. But why is the Scissor Man evil? And how does he have these supernatural powers at all? Well, we can put the dots together if we pay attention to what we find around the mansion. The small library room has a mural on the wall that depicts some kind of ritual. It seems the Barrows family are cultists of some sort, as evidenced by the ritual room and the cages filled with sacrificial animals. There are paintings of castles in the music room, which might imply a rich or upper-class heritage, and this is developed further in Clock Tower 2, when we go to the original Barrows family castle in England. Back in the mid-15th century, Theodore Barrows, having just returned home from the 100 Years' War, had a paralysing fear of death. He soon became interested in pagan religion, learning about a god of death simply called the Great Father. This god required sacrifices, and in return he would grant Theodore immortality, saving him from the death he feared so strongly. Theodore obliged and kidnapped children from nearby villages and towns, offering them as sacrifices. We even find the bones of the poor victims, who appear as ghosts before Jennifer towards the end of her story. But Theodore's family soon learned about what he was doing, and decided that murdering him was the only way to stop all of the bloodshed. Unfortunately, it was too late. The Great Father still continued to haunt them, and the Barrows lineage was afflicted with an awful curse, which causes murderous demon children to be born every couple of generations, the so-called Sons of the Great Father. Bobby and his brother Dan are the latest additions to this sinister legacy. This explains their inhuman strength, supernatural abilities, and bloodlust. They are literal hellspawn. And so, in the modern day, Mary is acting as an accomplice. She's bringing the girls to the mansion with the sole intention of offering them up to her 2 demon children. This is something she had been planning for weeks or months in advance. As Jennifer notes, today's date is marked on the calendar in the kitchen. The mummy that we find in a locker is one of their previous victims, her body left to rot in the hunting room. Of course, relentless as ever, Bobby uses his psychokinetic abilities to bring the mummy to life and frighten Jennifer, treating it as nothing more than a plaything for cheap tricks. But somewhere along the way, there was clearly some kind of fallout between Mary and her husband, Simon. While Mary and the twins are up to their evil antics, we find Simon locked up in a cage, being fed scraps and close to the brink of insanity. Perhaps he didn't agree with Mary's actions, or wanted to kill the demon children when they were born, knowing the chaos they would unleash as they grew older. This presented a problem for Mary, so she dealt with Simon in the same way that she dealt with the doctor, threw him in a cage and left him to rot. In Clock Tower 2, we visit Rick, a servant who worked for the Barrows family, who seemed to be on good terms with Simon in particular. The novelization develops this relationship further, with Rick saying that Simon fired all of the Barrows mansion staff to protect them from Mary and the demon twins. It's safe to assume from this that Simon Barrows was a kind and good-hearted man, trying to oppose his own evil lineage. Sadly, his good heart is exactly what led him to his tragic end. And, you know, the cool thing about the story in Clock Tower is it's one that can be analysed and deconstructed just as much as it can be taken at face value. You can read the novelizations to enrich the lore and pull your own readings from what happens in the game, or you can just take it as 2 crazy people going on a killing spree with some nonsensical spooky shit happening in the background. Clock Tower works well as both. It has a narrative that is accessible, but with deeper layers to it if you choose to venture that far. By all accounts, Clock Tower is still an incredibly fresh game even by modern standards, and compared to a lot of other 90s horror games, it's really stood the test of time. When it released in 1995, it did unexpectedly well, especially for one of the few horror titles on a family-friendly Nintendo console. While the previous 2 titles in the Cinematic Live series were localized for Western territories though, Clock Tower sadly never got the same treatment, most likely due to its violence and graphic scenes. Regardless, its success quickly led to a sequel, making the graphical and technical leap to PS1 and actually releasing worldwide this time. Years passed and other Clock Tower games came and went. Some good, some great, and some... But the Clock Tower series struggled to keep up with its horror contemporaries, especially as the genre flourished with titles like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, not to mention newcomers like Fatal Frame hitting it off too. Human Entertainment, the original developers of Clock Tower, went out of business in 2000, and the series rights were passed over to Sunsoft, a well-established Japanese publisher in the arcade scene, not so much in the home gaming scene. So what did Sunsoft decide to do next? Well, if you can't beat them, join them. Capcom were an unstoppable force in the gaming world at this point, and so Sunsoft teamed up with them to develop Clock Tower 3, a fresh new direction for the series and easily one of the most unique and lovable horror titles out there, as well as a big personal favourite of mine. It bombed commercially though, and thus sounded the final death knell of the Clock Tower series. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Perhaps even sadder than this was the fact the original SNES Clock Tower, the title that kickstarted not only this series but played a hand in kickstarting the survival horror genre as a whole, never saw a Western release. Now, this didn't stop people from playing the game, of course. Fan translations have been floating around as early as 2001, and anyone who cared about horror gaming history was already intimately aware how influential this game was. It was just a damn shame that, at least in an official capacity, Clock Tower on the SNES never got its flowers in the Western world. That being said, as a big fan of the series and a few incantations later, I held out hope that my wish could be granted one day. Fast forward to July 2023. During a limited run games showcase, our prayers were finally answered, and Clock Tower Rewind was revealed. Touted as a port plus by the publisher's Way Forward, this brand new release would simultaneously preserve the 1995 original while also introducing fun new bells and whistles to enhance the experience, like an animated opening, voiceover cutscenes, and general quality of life improvements like save states and a brand new rewind feature, hence the name. Get it? Rewind? Clock? It was a long wait until October 29th, 2024 when Clock Tower Rewind dropped, an especially ironic date given this was the game's first official localization 29 years after its original release. Full transparency, I was given a free key to Clock Tower Rewind by the lovely folks over at Way Forward back on its release, but I also dropped about $200 on the collector's box as well, so I'd say I evened the scales a little bit. What do you think? First thing you have to comment on immediately is the lovely new animated opening. The original game didn't really have anything like this. The closest would be the atmospheric intro that was added into the PS1 port, which shows a few creepy shots of the mansion in snazzy CGI graphics, but this kind of animation is definitely a first. There are a lot of cool nods to in-game scares packed into this short 60-second intro. Though, while I don't want to sound ungrateful, I would have loved to see a visual style that more closely replicates the original game's artwork. This opening is perhaps a little too glossy for my taste, especially when you contrast it with the darker, grittier visuals of the game itself. I think a more realistic style, something akin to the original game's character artwork or the official comic strips, would have made Rewind a bit more visually coherent. Regardless, seeing any kind of animated opening for this game 30 years later is a treat. These visuals are all accompanied by a lovely vocal track from Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, well known for performing the vast majority of vocal tracks in the Silent Hill series. The track is called Sharp Laughter, and is a booming James Bond-style epic. I'm particularly fond of that musical motif we were talking about earlier sneaking its way into the melody. It's an excellent detail. Though there are actually two new songs in Rewind. The second is sung by the wonderful Emmy Evans, most well known for her beautiful vocal work in the Nier and Drakengard series, some of my favourite games ever made. This track is called Fading Again, and compared to Sharp Laughter, it's a more calm but somber melody. Personally, I prefer this song a little bit more because it captures the quiet, eerie loneliness of Clock Tower very well. Moving past that, it's time to talk about what's new here. Let's get one thing clear right out the gate. Clock Tower Rewind is not a remaster or a remake. As stated in the original reveal trailer, it is a port plus. The game still plays and acts just like the SNES original, and there are a good few improvements that enhance the experience beyond that, but you are, at the end of the day, still playing a 1995 game. And that's all good and well, but what does port plus mean then? When you boot up the game, you'll be given two options. You can either play the original in all its 1995 glory, or the brand new Rewind mode. What does Rewind mode entail? A lot, to be honest. All of the new content that was added to the PS1 port is present here, meaning new rooms, new cutscenes, and new scares that were absent in the SNES original. This also means that Jennifer heals a lot faster. In the original, you had to wait an agonizingly long time for Jennifer's portrait to slowly go from red to orange to yellow and finally full health at blue. This takes almost an entire minute of waiting. In fairness, there was nothing stopping you from just leaving Jennifer's portrait red. It doesn't affect your ability to explore in any way, but if Scissorman found you and backed you into a corner, you would be, to use a technical term, fucked. In Rewind mode, her healing is a lot snappier, only taking about 10 seconds or so of your time. You are now able to run upstairs, which mightn't sound like a big deal, but oh my god, Jennifer took her sweet ass time walking up those staircases before, so this is seriously a game changer. This is a big one. Scissorman encounters are a lot more random in Rewind mode. He's very unpredictable and will show up a lot more frequently throughout your playthrough. This is a very good thing. In the original SNES version, Scissorman encounters were mostly scripted, meaning you could go the majority of the game without ever seeing him at all. Of course, these were just the limitations of old hardware and, you know, being one of the first horror games ever, but in the new Rewind mode, his enemy patterns have been revised entirely to be as unpredictable as you would expect a scissor-wielding stalker child to be. It offers some great jump scare moments, breathes so much life into the game, and in my opinion makes Rewind mode the definitive way to play this classic nowadays. These changes I just listed all exist thanks to a fan patch called Clock Tower Deluxe, created by the user BobSchneider45. This patch has existed since 2023, and the developers of Clock Tower Rewind actually got Bob Schneider on board to help develop this new Rewind mode, using his fan patch as the basis for it. This is not the only fan contribution present here. The commercial sampler available in the extras menu was originally discovered and archived by the lovely folks at Team C.U.T.S, the Clock Tower fan preservation team, and was included in Rewind with their permission. Massive kudos to developers who pay attention to the fanbase and include them in projects like this. Not only is it a great effort for game preservation as a whole, but it makes titles like Clock Tower Rewind feel like a collaborative effort by both the developers and the fanbase. Very cool, you love to see it. Something that is brand new to this re-release, however, is the titular rewind feature. You can rewind the game up to 10 seconds if you make a mistake or want to undo an action, especially useful in the heat of a chase. It's a great idea, and definitely a worthwhile inclusion since point-and-click games from this era are notoriously unforgiving. Even as a seasoned player myself, I've used rewind in a pinch when I've accidentally backed myself into a corner, something that's far more likely now with the improved Scissorman AI. However, there was some debate when this port came out that the rewind time isn't generous enough. 10 seconds is a lot shorter than you'd think, so you need to use it really quickly or too much time will pass and it won't help you anymore. So in that sense, the rewind is quite strict. But I would argue any more than 10 seconds would have been too generous and completely eliminated any threat or tension from the game. It was a tough balance for the devs to strike, I imagine, but personally, 10 seconds is just right. Helpful in a pinch, but not a mechanic you can use and abuse. All of these features are available in the brand new Rewind mode, and if you're a newcomer hoping to grab Clock Tower Rewind, I would highly recommend this mode as your first experience. It truly feels like the optimal way to play this game nowadays, especially so thanks to the newly added PS1 content and refined Scissorman AI. That being said, if you want to experience Clock Tower in its untouched 1995 state, you can always hop over to original mode for the real retro experience. I am a big fan of when ports and remasters do this, giving the player the option between the shiny new version and the original untouched experience. The Tomb Raider remasters also did this, letting you hop between the remastered and original graphics with the press of a button, and I strongly feel like this should be the new standard for re-releases going forward. I love all of the funky new goodies they added into this Clock Tower port, of course, but I think it's equally important that the original version is preserved as well, as it was in 1995, and Rewind does exactly that, best of both worlds. Beyond the base game, there's a bunch of goodies in the extras menu as well. First up are the motion comics. These are official comics from back in the day that were split across 2 releases. One batch was featured in the PS1 port limited edition, and the other batch was in the official strategy guide that released alongside the PS1 port. In Rewind, you unlock them gradually after seeing major story beats or scares in-game, but they've added music, sound effects, and voice acting to really bring these comic strips to life. Some voice acting performances are weaker than others, I can't lie, but it's a very neat inclusion all the same. There's also scans of the box art and manuals for both the SNES and PS1 releases, where you can see the character art and a pretty nifty map of the Barrows Mansion. Next, there's the commercial sampler that I mentioned earlier. This is effectively a demo that would have been sent to retailers and gaming magazines back in the day to drum up hype for Clock Tower's release. It includes the game opening and 3 playable demos, each containing a room from the mansion, mostly to show off the randomized gameplay and, of course, Scissorman himself. Interestingly, this commercial sampler was considered lost media until 2024, when it was found and preserved by Team C.U.T.S, now making its way into Rewind. Team C.U.T.S already made a wonderful video on their YouTube channel documenting their search for this newly found commercial sampler, and I highly recommend checking it out if you want to learn a little more about this interesting slice of Clock Tower history. Finally, we have a brand new interview with Hifumi Kono, the original creator of Clock Tower. Whether you're an old-time fan or a newcomer, there's a lot to unpack in this interview, as Kono delves into his inspirations, how he created Jennifer and Scissorman as characters, challenges he faced during development, and his thoughts on Rewind's release. It's a real treat to watch, so I won't spoil too much of it and leave it for you to enjoy. A special shout out is needed for the achievements as well. Obviously, this game boasts a full trophy/achievement list if that is your jam, but they are full of cute little nods and references that have to be talked about. The achievements, An Unnatural Phenomena and Creepers are both nods to, as you might guess, the Dario Argento film Phenomena, with Creepers being its localized title in America and the UK. A Great Father is a real deep-cut reference, possibly being a nod to the rather obscure lore that we discussed earlier concerning the demonic Great Father and his curse on the Barrows family. The First Fear is a nod to the full title of the game's PS1 re-release, Clock Tower: The First Fear, and Sheer Terror may be a nod to some of Clock Tower 2's marketing back in the 90s, which often used the slogan Sheer Terror. Excellent pun, by the way. There's a surprising number of Resident Evil nods in here too, with a nod to its game over screen, You Are Dead, The Keeper's Diary and its iconic line, Itchy Tasty, as well as Wesker's fascinating commentary when they first enter the Spencer Mansion.
Wow, what a mansion!
Lastly, we have Don't Cry Jennifer, which is a nod to what fans have nicknamed the chase music for decades at this point. It wouldn't be until 2015, when Sunsoft released the official Clock Tower sound collection for its 20th anniversary, that the entire OST would get official titles, the chase music being simply called Murderer. But I don't know, I think Don't Cry Jennifer is a much more haunting, memorable title for what is easily the most well-known track in the game, and it's cute that Rewind included yet another nod to fan efforts. There's for sure a lot of great new stuff here, and I adore the new additions to this game. But I also have a small few critiques about Clock Tower Rewind that need to be addressed for the sake of being a balanced discussion. The first issue is a pretty specific one. As we discussed earlier, the motion comics unlock after major story beats and scares. The problem is, it's kinda hard to miss them unlocking, because a massive screen-wide notification pops up to let you know. Even worse, this notification lingers on screen for quite a bit, so iconic moments like Scissorman's first appearance in the shower, or when he bursts through the ceiling, are ruined for new players by an obnoxiously large notification. Thankfully, these only happen on a first playthrough. Once you see them once, you'll never have to see them again. But even so, did we really need to obscure the entire screen like this? I wish I could say there was an option to turn these notifications off, but no, there isn't. And it sucks that first-time players won't even get to properly see some of the most iconic moments in the game. Next, we need to talk about the save state system. The original SNES Clock Tower was quite advanced for its time because it had its own built-in auto-save system every time you enter or leave a room. Same goes for whenever you get an ending. This means that despite being 30 years old, Clock Tower has aged wonderfully for modern audiences because even if you die, you can hit continue on the main menu and lose virtually no progress at all. Rest assured, this function still exists in Rewind. However, it's important to note that Rewind is running the game via an emulator, hence the inclusion of save states. So regardless of Clock Tower's built-in autosave, you still need to pause the emulator and press save game to really save your progress. And okay, why is that a bad thing exactly? Let's use an example. Say I go ahead, play the entire game and get one of the endings. I even see the ending unlocked at the main menu. Great, that autosave is really handy. So I go and hit quit game, ignoring the save button because, well, it's right there, the game already saved, right? You just lost all of your progress. When you next boot up the game, there'll be nothing there to load and you'll have to start everything from scratch, because you didn't save via the emulator menu. This isn't even a hypothetical scenario because it happened to me when I was going for the achievements. If it isn't obvious from my explanation, and guys, I'm really trying my best to explain this here, it's a messy system. If it could happen to me, then how about someone who buys this on sale who has no understanding of emulators and save states and all that jazz? The game already has a surprisingly modern save system built into it, so frankly there was no need to include save states at all, and now that they're here, they hinder more than they help. As I mentioned earlier, fan translations have been floating around for this game since the early 2000s. So while Rewind is the first official translation, it's hard not to compare it to the fan efforts that have existed for decades before it. As someone who has played the game in both Japanese and English countless times, I can confidently, but sadly say, that I still think the early 2000s fan translation is superior. Some of the dialogue in Rewind doesn't flow as naturally as the fan translation. Take the opening scene, for example. When the other girls disappear and the lights go out, Jennifer exclaims, "Come on, this isn't funny," in the fan translation, whereas Rewind opted for, "Hey, stop teasing me." It's subtle, but I feel the former is the much more natural sentence to say in this context. There are also rare occasions where the translation changes the original meaning quite a bit, like the well-known opening line, "It happened in September," being changed to "This is how it all started," which has a much more lighthearted and almost slapstick energy to it. This critique of mine is very nitpicky, I can admit, though not surprising given the first video I ever made on this channel was a translation comparison. But even if that weren't the case, the dialogue that Rewind opted for is noticeably stiff at points. I've also learned that there's a number of errors in the other available languages too. For example, in French, the skeleton's note says he survived being locked in a room for 3 years, when it is meant to say 3 days. Whereas the German translation suffers from some overlapping text in the control options settings. These are very fixable issues that, at the time of making this video, still haven't been fixed. In a similar vein, it's also worth noting that while the base game is indeed translated into a pretty wide variety of languages, the extra content is not. The interview with Hifumi Kono and the comic strips, for example, are available in English and Japanese only, meaning that Rewind is only half translated for the majority of the languages it offers. While I completely understand that this is all more than likely due to budgeting issues, I wish it was made more transparent at the time of release. I do want to emphasize though that these critiques come from a place of love. This is my favorite horror game ever, so not only do I want to see it thrive, but I want new players' experiences of it to be the best possible. It's still monumental that Clock Tower finally got its Western release almost 30 years later, and it was also the first time in years that there's been any kind of official merchandise that came in the form of this big-ass limited edition. Guys, today we are doing something that I've been waiting to do for so long. We are unboxing the Clock Tower Rewind limited edition. This limited edition was handled by Limited Run. It was available to pre-order around June 2024, and I got it, and I've been waiting for it for so long, but I said I would save it for this video, so here we are. Oh. Isn't she beautiful? The artwork on this limited edition is actually fan art that's been circulating around Clock Tower fandoms for quite a while now. Gorgeous art by the Japanese artist Mr. Kusui. I was so happy to see that they brought this on board for Rewind. It's absolutely stunning art. It's exactly what I would want to be the box art. I've been waiting for this moment. It's been sitting on my shelf just over there, taunting me. Looking all sexy on my shelf, bro. Okay, let's see what this is. Clock Tower Rewind Tower Statuette. Cool. Ooh, it's heavy. Ooh, Okay, ooh, it's really heavy. Wow. Oh my god, that is a chunky little thing right there. Wow, so this is, as you could probably guess, the titular clock tower. It says Sunsoft and Capcom at the bottom. It's still very surreal seeing Capcom's name on clock tower things. It says Clock Tower Rewind on the front of it in very fine text. Really detailed little model. Wow. The paintwork on this is really solid. Absolutely stunning. What are you? What are you? What are you? Oh, okay, the soundtrack. The soundtrack. Here we are. Okay, we got a CD. It's got a lot of songs on it too. There's 44 tracks on this. God damn, that's a beefy little CD. Let's get her out of there. Remember CDs? Remember that? Historical artifact? Here we are. CD, exactly what you'd expect a CD to be, really. So it's got the vocal tracks, and it's also got the music from the motion comics. That's cool. I'll have to give those a listen because those are also brand new. And then it's also, of course, got the original soundtrack, of which there are about 30 tracks, all the OG music. Interesting thing to note about Rewind is that it uses specifically the SNES music for Clock Tower, so the PS1 port actually had a completely redone soundtrack. Even the sound effects were redone as well. I was curious which OST they were going to commit to for Rewind, and they stuck with the SNES for the best, in my opinion. Oh, hang on. We've got more. Of course, stickers. Very cool. So we got all the character portraits, every single character. We got one of Bobby, we got one of Jennifer, and we, of course, have the Clock Tower Rewind logo. Although I am sad to say, in classic me fashion, I am never going to use these stickers. I want to preserve these. Clock Tower stickers, are you kidding me? This shit is a limited edition. Never using this. Cool, a poster, of course. A classic in almost any limited edition. With absolutely stunning art. Wow, you're not going to be able to see that at all with the glare. The stunning art by Shintaro Kago. If you're not familiar with Shintaro Kago, he is a manga artist who's been working in the industry since the 80s. He is an OG and a perfect fit, really, for a horror game, right? Stunning art. I absolutely love it. Very trippy, very creepy and haunting. So while I was saying that the Mr. Kasui art for the box is not new art, it has been circulating online for a few years, this Shintaro Kago art is brand new. Another interesting thing to note about the art is he drew Dan instead of Bobby. You can tell by the kind of blue button-up shirt and pants that he's wearing, whereas Bobby is obviously rocking the shorts and the blazer. So a very interesting artistic liberty that he took with the art, but oh my goodness, I love it. It's very classic looking. We got the Shintaro Kago art on the front, and we've got, of course, once again, the classic SNES art. Very cool. Lovely. That will be going on my wall. Is there something in this? No, it's cardboard. Okay. What's this? It's heavy enough. I've been waiting for this one. This is the crown. This is the crown jewel of the limited edition. The pièce de résistance, if you will. Come out, little man. There he is. Oh my goodness, there he is! I'm so glad to have this in my hands, finally. It is a Dan squish toy, what are those called? Stress balls? Of Dan in his overgrown, disgusting baby form. Oh, it's a lovely foam kind of texture. Really nice detail on this. They got all the folds of his skin, the gross, overgrown, inhuman shape of him down really well. Ever since I saw this was going to be a part of the limited edition, I was sold already because it was Clock Tower, but dude, are you kidding me? Oh dude, there's more in here. It's a keychain. Oh my goodness, this is lovely. It's heavy too. This is pure metal, this is. This is a keychain of the demon idol that you pick up in the game. A very important item in both the SNES original and also the sequel, Clock Tower 2. What's also interesting about this is, obviously being a game from 1995, it was really hard to see the fine details of this demon idol in the game, you know, because of the sprites and the pixels and all that. So this is probably the first time that we've seen it in detail, really. You know, we've seen the finer details of it. Okay, next up, we've got standees. How big are these? Look massive, Jesus. Whoa. Wow, those are really big. These are massive. The icons themselves, Jennifer and Bobby. These are really nice. Gorgeous colouring in them as well. Wow. Really good high quality renders on them. Perfect. Awesome. Oh, a pin. Yes. If you're unfamiliar with Clock Tower, there is indeed a puzzle that involves ham. So when you get stuck in a cage with a very hungry gentleman, you need to grab some ham in the kitchen beforehand to feed it to him, or else he eats you for dinner. And this is a pin of ham. There's not that many key items in Clock Tower, and a lot of them are keys, so ham is a good choice. You went with a good one there. It's not very appetizing looking, but that's okay, it is a horror game. Oh, is there something else, or is this just... Oh, the game itself. I completely forgot. Oh yeah, there's a game in here too. Look at this, it's so small. This is adorable. PC Micro. I get it's called PC Micro, but I didn't know it was this micro. You slip it out of its case like that? Oh, pretty. It's just a memory stick, but like it says Clock Tower on it. I'd honestly love if more games were this small. It's much better for shelving and for storage. It's really cute. I like that. This design is very pleasant to me. I believe that is everything that is in the Clock Tower Rewind box. But what a lot of people don't know is there was actually a second limited edition that released exclusively in Japan that had some slightly different goodies in it. So I bought it, obviously. We're keeping our golden child here, but here we are. The Super Deluxe version that released exclusively in Japan. So while the limited run box set me back about $175, ouch, this only cost me about $40? It was dirt cheap. It was frankly a steal. It was hard to say no to this one, especially when I found out there were different things in it. I love how neat this is. This is so pretty. I love this. An interesting choice that they made with this is they replicated the original SNES box art. Here is the SNES version for comparison. So they completely replicated the original box art here. It's really cool, a nice little throwback, you know? So there was only 2 versions available of this, either Switch or PS5. I don't own either console, so I just went with the PS5. Of course, the game itself. Oh, wait, hang on, this is so cool. Ah, wait a minute. They replicated the original SNES manual. Wait, hang on, I think they replicated the entire manual, even the layout, the font choice, the colors. This is crazy. What a nice touch. I really like that. Instead of the Human Entertainment logo, a company that are sadly defunct now, they said Horror Entertainment, but they did it in the style of the Human Entertainment logo. What a wonderful touch. I really like that. I never thought I would be so enthralled by a manual, and here we are. Okay, let's see what is new in here. The soundtrack. Of course, this is my 3rd time owning the soundtrack for this game. I own the sound collection, the limited run, and now Super Deluxe. I own the soundtrack 3 times. Can you tell I like Clock Tower? Is that obvious yet? Are you able to tell? Ooh, wait, no, this kind of trumps the limited run version though. I'm gonna say that right out the gate. It's a lovely, narrow slip. Very pretty. Check that out. Lovely, unfolding booklet of sorts. It's got 44 tracks on it, just like the limited run version. A little booklet with it too. Okay, so they got an interview with who exactly? Hifumi Kono, Kaori Takazoe, and Koji Nikura, aka the director and the 2 composers and sound designers. Nice. Very nice. Yeah, that was not in the limited run version either. Awesome. That interview is going to be some light reading with a cup of tea for me later today. Oh, art cards. Very nice. Very nice. So the Mr. Kasui art, of course, lovely. And the Shintaro Kago art also makes an appearance as an art card. Very nice. Gorgeous art. I can't even pick a favorite. I love both of them so much. And of course, a sticker sheet. But this one is a tiny bit different. We've got the characters, we've got the logo, but the dead end on the side, that's new. That wasn't in the limited run version, and it has a bunch of scissor men walking along next to it. That's interesting. A nice little deviation. Cool. Much like the limited run version, I'm never going to use these. I will just stare at them and look at them and think that they are pretty. Oh, okay. Next up we've got a little collectible card. I've never bought from Super Deluxe before, but I believe they do collectible cards for all of their limited edition releases, and this is the Clock Tower one. Ooh, it's got a metallic sheen to it as well. Nice, that is pretty. Now, we come to the last item, okay? This single book right here, this is what sold me on the Super Deluxe version. It's called a bonus Bible for super fans. That's me. I super fan. Now this art is brand new. This was not anywhere to be seen in the limited run edition. This was done by the wildly talented Nanae Masaki, who was actually the original artist for Clock Tower back in the 90s. Though worth noting that she went by the pen name Yuki Takayama in the original game. And they got her back all these years later to do brand new art for this re-release. That was all it took to sell me on the Super Deluxe version. Got her back to do art for this as well as a mini interview that's in this booklet. On top of that, there's also OG character sketches. There's even little artwork here, which is the concept art that Human Entertainment would have given to Nanae Masaki when she was designing Scissorman. Crazy that she kept it all these years later. That's amazing. And I think that's it. I think we've seen everything there is to see here. I can't put into words how ecstatic I was when an OG favourite like Clock Tower popped up out of nowhere and got a modern day localization, not to mention new merchandise in God knows how long. I must admit, I'll always have a special love for the series given that it was the video topic that more or less kickstarted my YouTube channel, and given that video is about to become 3 years old and I just hit 100,000 subscribers recently, I don't know man, I'm feeling mushy, okay? I'm feeling tangomushi. That video, and by extension Clock Tower, is what allowed me to now do this YouTube gig full time, and I'll hopefully continue to make these silly videos for as long as you guys will have me. Whether you found my channel through the old Clock Tower video, or this is your first time ever watching me at all, thanks for being here. It's all thanks to this little game that released on the SNES 30 years ago. An experience that is still to this day a masterclass in horror gaming, with a thick atmosphere that envelops you from start to finish, with a visual style that hasn't aged a day, so much so that it's still being imitated as a throwback style even now. A soundtrack that is minimalist but purposeful, knowing exactly when to break the suffocating silence, and a story that is both simple and effective, one that you have to unravel for yourself, as much or as little as you see fit. No part or moment of Clock Tower feels wasted or undercooked. Every room, every character, and every pixel serves its purpose, so much so that even now it's almost impossible to fault. And that is why Clock Tower is my favorite horror game. Hello! Thank you for watching and sticking around this long, I really appreciate it. A lot of love and care went into this one. I really wanted to make this video special, so I sincerely hope you enjoyed watching. Special thanks to Diario of Team C.U.T.S for designing the absolutely phenomenal sprite work that you saw in the intro. They went above and beyond to replicate the SNES graphics as faithfully as possible, and they absolutely smashed it. If you'd like video updates and stream updates and see what I'm getting up to in between videos, feel free to drop me a follow over on Blue Sky or Twitch. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, I have a Patreon where you can get early video previews, some behind the scenes goodies, and written reviews that I don't post anywhere else for just $2 a month. My latest review was a glowing discussion of one of the best indie horror games of the year so far, Labyrinth of the Demon King, and you can read that and more over on the Patreon. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.